everyone.
All right, we're going live in 5 seconds.
Beautiful.
And I've made you co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Great.
All right, guys, welcome back. We are now 5 seconds. Sorry, turn on the video. We're now live with Cameron from Sol.Food, and I believe Jima will be joining.
I do hope so.
Awesome. All right. So for those of you who are tuning in, this is a fairly informal session. So feel free to relax, grab a drink, cup of tea, whatever you like. Cameron's going to be inspiring and sharing stories. So I think you all can just sit back, relax, and have fun. So Cameron, over to you. Do you want to do a quick intro?
I would love to. It might be long actually, because we have all night.
No problem.
All night, guys. And yeah, basically, I was on a really long trip with a cook. So I guess that's how I got tied into doing a zero hunger talk today. And well, we're not authorities on the matter, but we met a lot of people who are. And so our job is to be the messengers to find their stories out there in the world and deliver them to you. And tonight we've come to you with 4 really cool examples of human beings who are challenging basically the status quo. We look at food as something that, well, everyone looks at it differently. Everyone looks at it like some people just go to the supermarket and they look at it as if something that they never get to see the process happen. Whereas other people, I just was working on a farm this morning, so I know how that looks too. And yeah, it's worlds apart, absolutely worlds apart. But we are all living on the same planet, so I guess it's best that we get on the same page and we figure out what we're capable of and what this planet is not capable of handling. This is quite serious way to start off a kind of informal discussion, but I've been inspired today. There's been some amazing speakers, so.
But you should just go ahead and share, no problem.
Beautiful. Well, just to give you a rundown, there's four different stories we're gonna share with you today. 5, I guess. One of them is our own. Unfortunately, that always sneaks into the mix because it's quite extraordinary in its own way. This will be the story of the.
Do you guys hear me by any chance?
There he is. Turn on your camera.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I screen names, passwords. You know, I'm a cook after all.
This is my friend 901641.
So that's the password was not there. Okay, I got it.
Just click on your little start video button, the bottom left-hand corner, whenever you get a chance. Yay! So this is the trouble in my life. The cook, Guglielmo Sartor. So I was telling them that there's going to be 5 stories that we're going to be hitting them with tonight. The first, unfortunately, being ours, as usual. And then one about a man who's basically kind of like a activist, performance artist, guerrilla gardener, all around incredible man named Rob Greenfield. And he's going to basically try to bring us back down to earth, teach us about basically supplying yourself with your own food anywhere so that you're not reliant on anyone. And it's a full-time thing, but it can be delicious, it can be really healthy, and awesome commitment he made to prove that we don't need anyone's permission to feed ourselves. It's all there. Second story is about a friend of ours from Greece. Well, we don't know where he's from really. He's from the world. But
he said Paris once.
He did.
2 weeks. And then he left.
Yeah. It just Paris popped out a really beautiful specimen named Lonais, who basically is a great educator in a way. He's done a project called School Without Frontiers. He's a forager, he's an adventurer, followed by an awesome project in Ireland where these guys basically made a kind of like an activist move, taking a huge loan to rescue some land from a forestry company. this was then transformed into a farm, a community-supported agriculture farm. GMO's in Berlin, if you can't tell. And lastly,
Space lights.
a little fable from Vietnam, from our own travels as well. But I'll let the cook tell you about what he thinks about food. He spent his whole life around it.
Actually, Jimo, that would be really
Yes.
nice to kind of get your insight, because obviously this talk is about, goal 2, zero hunger, very big target.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's nice for audiences to understand your personal story. How did you fall in love with food? How did you get into cooking? All that sort of stuff. Because I think personal stories just help people kind of feel like they can do the same thing too.
Sure thing. It would be my pleasure. Well, the romantic aspect of it all is that food are my first memories. So I remember the roast cooked far away opposite the street, and I was free, and I always guessed what was cooking in my house and other places' house. Then it became a job because many cooks are lazy, and many cooks don't like to spend time on their books and study, or at least they do not do that. They do not understand. At least I don't understand. I didn't understand the teaching that I was receiving in high school because they didn't catch me. It wasn't physical. It wasn't material. I couldn't wrap my head around that sort of knowledge. Therefore, I've jumped from that school and I moved to the cooking one, and that was the proof. I became a cook, and I started traveling around the world and using this job to learn languages, explore, and then find a way to feed myself and feed my brain and do what it was not possible to do in high school. So find a way to learn, to educate myself. I cannot say much about the topic that today we're going to discuss, zero hunger. I can say what I think, which is more emotional. It comes from the guts. It comes from the importance of being fed or feeding someone else, not only on like physically, not only eating, but also mentally educating. And in this sort of way is how Camero and I met on the road in Paris. I was on my journey, he was on his journey, and we were doing two different kind of journeys. He was searching himself and with no money on the streets of Europe, looking for answers, looking for a different way on how he was living life back home. And I was in Paris to have some fantastic wine and some fantastic food and meet up with a friend. And then we crossed paths, and he didn't eat for like a few days and was sleeping under a bridge. That's what he said. He asked me for a cigarette. I gave him the cigarette, and after he said something smart, because he always does that. Good smart, lovely smart. And I said, like, all right, I like you a lot, and I'll offer you a meal. And that's where our journey began together, where I shared what I knew and he shared what he knew, and then 2 years after we started. But yeah, I'll pass the ball back to the storyteller for this.
Well, before you do that, though,
yes,
I
please.
think it's nice that you shared that sentiment, because I think sometimes when we're discussing these sorts of big problems in the world, we sometimes forget that actually kind of coming back to yourself and thinking about what could you simply do is the simplest action that you could take. And I love that story you shared where you're like, all right, I'm going to share a meal with you. Like that was your simple action. And I think sometimes when we're talking about big changes, we forget the little things that we can do. So it's kind of the reason I really wanted both of you to share your story, because I wanted to show people. I mean, I've loved your journey. I told Cameron the other day I watched the entire playlist on YouTube of your entire journey.
Not a lot of people does that.
No,
no
I know,
problem.
but I did that. But again, it's because I love the way you tell stories. So I'm going to stop talking and let you guys do what you do best.
Thank you.
All right, no pressure. So yeah, I guess we kind of came from similar backgrounds that brought us to this journey. Definitely the journey was something that was important to both of us, though. I don't exactly know what you were trying to get out of it. For me, it was just yeah, a reason not to like live by anyone else's standards. So to meet all these people on our journey as well, who seem to kind of echo that ethos, you know, people who are just living a life that they created, was pretty inspiring, and we just seemed to gravitate toward each other. And that's how we met a lot of the people who we're going to introduce you tonight. But like it's and it's awesome. I'm gonna also post the links to the videos in the chat on Eugenie, just in case my screen share is lagging. There's no point in you suffering. Just, you know, click, watch through, jump back on. We'll be talking for sure. So I'll drop those in now, and then we'll crack on. Gmo, do you want to take the floor for a minute?
Yeah. With pleasure. I feel that I didn't entirely answer to what Nisha was asking. I did partially, which was my point of view, and she filled in saying that emotions and like simple gestures are what we forget, and I think this is an important topic that we're gonna keep bringing up through this 2 hours conversation. Neither Kamara and I are expert on this kind of things, and I was saying this before, but somehow thanks to this journey and thanks to like actually getting out of the door and crossing the world and going to meet people from different places with different situations, with different status in a way, you get to see what life really is. And you do understand that, first of all, people really need to be fed on every way, food, educations, and so on, and then you'll find that people are constantly trying to find solutions in order to their problems, and sometimes it's complicated to find solutions for other people when you do not understand what their problem really is, and
Or what our problem really is.
oh yeah, exactly. Like we didn't know what our problem was, but all the problems in the world helped us to understand a little more what we are.
Yeah, and where we come from as well, you know, the things that we took for granted, the things that we even like kind of based ourselves on, were sometimes totally like unrooted, you know.
Yeah,
we would think that something was I mean, from the way we live to the stories we watch, you know, like I realized how much I'd been conditioned by the place I'd grown up, and how it did not at all apply to many people in the world, you know.
Yeah.
So you get to challenge those things, you get to challenge everything, I guess. And then the parts that stick, the parts that don't have like have a tag on them, that's you in the end.
and we do come from two places that have quite of a stereotype, America and Italy, and our people definitely enjoy write the historical books, and to write the historical books, and then you go see the reality of the things, and it's not exactly how,
yeah, not at all. I heard a good quote the other day. It was that until the lion learns how to read and write, the hunter will always win in the storybooks.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
That's a nice one, yeah.
Kenya jumps in there.
We're going to be in trouble because that's going to happen very, very soon.
Yeah, hopefully there's
for the hunters.
Right on. Well, so basically, we had a little theory on this whole trip about hunger and about education. And I guess if I want to be poetic, it's just that the thing that we were seeking, what we were hungry for, was always like something like, wasn't material, wasn't actually food, it was inspiration, or it was knowledge in some sense. And luckily that's what we found. And I think that what we're trying to share with you tonight is not solutions at all to the big problem, but there are solutions for people who've made it work for them. And as individuals, they've been able to challenge a much bigger system. So really, there's like one ambassador who really represents this, and that's Rob Greenfield. So I'm going to attempt to share his story with you now. You're going to get to see all of the tabs I have open on my computer. Okay, desktop 1, share. Do it. Can you see yourself, Guillermo?
I can still see myself, yeah. And I cannot see, but know your tabs.
Can't see YouTube?
It's still you. It's just you, Cameron.
It's just you.
Man.
So you might have to
Let's
bring
take a
onto
minute.
you might have
Brief
to
in, brief out.
you might have to bring it onto the screen that you're on Zoom with.
That is the one. Let's see here. Namisha, do you think you can save my butt here? And
Yeah, which one do you want me to play, Rob's?
the first one, yeah, Rob Greenfield.
Let's do this.
It's the dream.
Okay, before he starts, let me share. There you go. Can you see that?
I can see that you started.
It's loading up. Yeah, we
There
can
he
see
is.
that.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're gonna get started.
Rock and roll.
It's the dream. Complete self-sufficiency, to grow all of their own food and never have to take a trip to the grocery store. But for most people, it's just that, a dream. The ease of our current global industrial food system is just that, too easy, too convenient, too time-saving, and too alluring. I've been exploring food for nearly a decade, and since the beginning, I've had the
Thank you, YouTube.
burning question. Could I step outside of the big ag system? Could I go without grocery stores and restaurants? Nothing packaged or processed, nothing shipped from a far off place. Could I grow and forage 100% of my food, everything that I ate for an entire year? That's exactly the journey and the quest that I decided to set out on, and now I'm here to share the story with you. But one big thing, I had very little experience with growing my own food. When I lived in San Diego, I did have a few raised beds where I grew some greens, tomatoes, and herbs. But as a traveler for the last 7 or so years, I had never really settled in one place long enough to grow my own food. So in order to do this, I would have to settle in one place. And that place that I chose is Orlando, Florida, where I'm sitting right now. Besides being really fresh to growing my own food, I was also fresh to the scene here in Orlando and Florida. And I was giving myself just 2 years here before hitting the road again. So I had to get planting as soon as I landed here. But I didn't have a garden, I didn't own any land, and I had almost no experience with foraging in the state of Florida. I chose Florida so that I could grow food year-round. And I chose Orlando because I had passed through here a few times and met a great community of permaculturists and people who grow their own food. And specifically, I chose the community of Audubon Park because that's where Orlando Permaculture and my friends at Fleet Farming were based. And there was already a movement here of turning front yards into gardens. So I would have the support I needed in order to do it here. I quickly got to work meeting people in my neighborhood and proposing the idea to them of turning their front lawns into gardens. It really wasn't hard to find takers because it was a pretty sweet deal. Their boring lawn would be turned into a garden. I'd do almost all of the work, cover the costs, and they could eat all the food they liked right from their front yard. In fact, I quickly had a list of lawns longer than I could handle. The transformation was amazingly quick, and within just a few months, I was growing more food than I could eat myself and sharing it with friends in the neighborhood. I ended up creating 6 small plots, all within easy cycling distance of each other. I was just figuring out what I was doing the whole time. I went to local meetups like Orlando Permaculture, volunteered in the garden with Fleet Farming, visited farms and gardens and nurseries, took foraging classes with local foragers like Green Dean, read books by local growers, and watched videos online and more. For a place to live, I built a simple tiny house homestead in the backyard of a community member that I met. And in exchange for using their space, I turned their monoculture of grass into an at-home supermarket. Starting from scratch, it took me 10 months to be comfortable and ready to begin my year. November 11th, 2018 would be my first day. It was now time to eat 100% from my gardens and food that I would forage. Now, when I say 100%, I truly mean it. No grocery stores or restaurants, no drinks at a bar, nothing packaged or processed, nothing shipped long distances, no farmers markets, not even going over to my friend's pantry or even going to their gardens or their food forests. Why not share food from my friends' gardens? Because I wanted to truly immerse in my food. I wanted to have to literally figure out how to grow every single food or ingredient that I needed, or how to source it from nature. Many people know me for my dumpster diving to raise awareness about food waste. And a lot of people who follow me online assumed that I would still be eating from dumpsters. But nope, no food from dumpster diving at all. I had already proved to myself that I could live off of the waste of our globalized food system. Now it was time to see if I could step away from that completely. That included everything that I put in my body, even supplements, vitamins, and medicines. Now, you'd think on day one that maybe I'd have eaten a lot of 100% homegrown and foraged meals, but to be honest, my first meal on day one was my first 100% homegrown and foraged meal of my entire life. It was day one, and I was in the deep end. But I had laid the foundation that I needed. My gardens scattered across the neighborhood were full of food, and I had scouted out food both in the city and the countryside to forage. My supermarket was on nearly every street I could walk down, and the shelves were stocked. Over the last 365 days, I grew and harvested over 100 different foods from my gardens and foraged over 200 different foods from nature. That's a new species for almost every single day of the year. I grew a dozen different greens packed with nutrients: moringa, katuk, chaya, purslane, collards, kale, and perennial spinaches, just to name a few. I grew sweet potatoes, cassava, and yams for my main caloric needs, pigeon peas and southern peas for protein, delicious fruits like papayas and bananas, Seminole pumpkins, carrots, eggplants, just to name a few vegetables, and garlic, onion, peppers, and many herbs to add flavor and nutrition to all of my meals. And I raised bees for honey to satisfy my sweet tooth, which, believe me, I do have quite the sweet tooth. All of the bees that I stewarded were rescued with my friend Dennis the Bee Guy from locations where people didn't want them living, such as in the side of their homes. I harvested giant wild yams from the woods, picked coconuts to make coconut milk, butter, and coconut curries, foraged from fruit trees in the wild, growing in public parks, and in the city with the bounty of fruit falling onto the sidewalks. And of course, wild bananas too. I caught fish from the oceans, lakes, and rivers, and even harvested deer that had been hit by cars during my visit to Wisconsin. I harvested over 20 species of mushrooms in the woods, picked nutritious plants that people call weeds that they walk by unknowingly or even constantly battle with in their yards and gardens. My caffeine came from the native Yaupon holly tree that I made a tea from, and I even harvested my own sea salt from the ocean by collecting the water, boiling it down in a pot until I was left with just the sea salt for my meals. I grew and foraged all of my own medicine and vitamins too. I grew fresh turmeric and ginger in my gardens, foraged elderberries from the wild. I harvested reishi mushrooms and herbal teas, and grew moringa, also known as the vitamin tree, to make an easy to travel with multivitamin powder. But most importantly, my food was my medicine. It's a different way of thinking for most people, but even the weeds that grow just outside of our doorstep are some of the most nutritionally and medicinally dense plants on Earth. For the last year, nature has been my garden, my pantry, and my pharmacy. With the seasons, my foods varied greatly. I cooked up dozens of different healthy meals, fermented foods like sauerkraut with my homegrown cabbage and herbs, and fermented delicious beverages like honey wine and ginger beer, and whipped up delicious desserts and ate the healthiest food of my entire life. This was food that I could feel truly good about eating. It was all local, all natural, and all organic. I made it through the entire year without using a single pesticide. Now, sure, I had my problems with pests, like when the cucumber worms decided to attack my Seminole pumpkins. But when I was growing over 100 different foods, if the pests were attacking 4 or 5 of them, I still had 95 other foods that I could eat. Just as importantly though, I chose to grow the plants that thrive in this environment. When I started, I didn't walk down the aisles of the grocery store and ask which foods that I liked the most. Instead, I talked to local farmers and gardeners and my permaculturist friends and asked them what foods grow so ridiculously well and so ridiculously abundantly that I could hardly screw it up. And those are the plants that I chose to focus on. And that's one of the main things that got me through this year. This was without a doubt one of the most challenging things that I've ever done. A year is a really long time, and I had my highs and my lows. There were times when I felt my absolute best, and there were times when I just didn't know if I could go on. Generally, I did get enough food. My weight stayed the same about the entire time, so I did have enough calories, but there were times when I felt like I was really deficient, mostly in fat and protein. Those were the times when I found it really hard to want to keep going. And there was the social aspect. I was on my own a lot of the times, not able to join other people for their meals, and sort of isolated, not being able to go to restaurants or eat with friends and family. Overall, with all the ups and downs, the year went about as well as I could have possibly hoped. I maintained my body weight throughout the year, and I never got sick once. And I really attribute that to my food being my medicine. I think that nature is able to provide for our basic needs, and I trusted Earth. I trusted nature. Now, I want to say, though, that this project, it wasn't really about my health. It wasn't about a diet. And I don't believe that this is the diet for 7 billion people. I don't actually think there is one diet for the 7 billion people. I think we live on a diverse world where we have diverse cultures and people need to do things in a very different way. So I'm not trying to represent a diet for everyone or anything like that. This was just my own personal quest to see if I could step away from Big Ag, step away from what I see as a broken food system, and instead grow and forage 100% of my own food for an entire year. This project wasn't just about growing and foraging all of my own food though. It was about empowering others to grow their own food, to take back power from Big Ag, and ultimately to take back their health and grow their communities. So during this time, I started a few community initiatives. We built 15 gardens for the people, planted over 200 community fruit trees, and sent out over 5,000 free seed packs to help others grow their own organic, healthy food. And I taught dozens of free gardening classes in my gardens to the people in my community. I'll be honest though, I do have an agenda. I want you to question your food. Where did it come from? How was it grown? How did it get to you? And what was the impact that it had on the earth, other species, and the humans that grow that food? And if you don't like the answers that you find, I want to empower you to change them. The good news though is that you don't have to grow and forage all of your food. The solutions are there in your community. You can grow a little bit of your own food, maybe an herb garden on your windowsill, or some pots of tomatoes and basil on your balcony, or a raised bed in your front yard. And if you don't have any space at all, you can join a community garden. You can source your food locally and purchase from local farmers and gardeners. The farmers market is a great place to start. You can buy whole foods and cook more rather than packaged processed foods that leave trash behind. And you can work with your community to make healthy foods for people in need. Grow a garden for your elderly neighbor, or start a grassroots organization to harvest the fruit trees in your community to distribute it to others. And this doesn't need to be a lonely journey. For most of us, food is at the center of our lives, and we can do this together in our communities. My year is over, but my journey of food has just begun. A book is in the works, and 100% of my proceeds will be donated to organizations working on the food solutions. And I'll be here online sharing inspiration and education on how you can get involved in gaining food freedom. My mouth is cold now.
Beautiful.
Oh, that was brilliant, yeah.
Beautiful, man. So yeah, thank you, Rob, for Rob actually sent us this video and this kit because we reached out to him. We'd met him in Berlin back when we were both supposed to be presenting at the travel festival, which was canceled. So we instead linked up, and here we are having our own festival, and we're presenting with Rob. However we can, you know.
I think what he talked about when he said that, you know, there's no one solution or one type of diet or one sort of approach is actually very fundamental, because just in the spirit of you guys and how you share stories, I reflect very much back on my childhood growing up in Kenya. And, you know, we never went to the supermarket to buy our vegetables. We had very similar to what Rob described, local farmers who would be, you know, coming around once or twice a week with, you know, a big, you know, bag of produce that they've grown on their own lot, which we call shambas in Kenya. And, you know, this is totally organic, serving people within our community. So when we moved here, over time, it was very strange to overcome that concept of always buying your food wrapped in plastic that has flown so many miles just to get to you. So it's very empowering to see people like Rob do what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously not everyone can live that way because it's entirely time consuming, you know, as he pointed out. But at least he's demonstrating that this is possible, you know, that if you need to, you can do it. So no one has to worry about, you know, oh, if the supermarket goes away, I'm going to starve. No, you will figure it out, as people always have. And I think the more this is talked about and the more this knowledge is put out there, this is how you can challenge big agriculture. Because once they realize that we don't need them, then they'll have to start to change. So that was, I mean, for me, the really inspiring part. And that's all he's been doing, actually. Like he said at one point in that video, this was one of the most difficult things he's had to do, or maybe the most. This is someone who traveled all through South America for 4 months with no money as a point. He said, it was called Free Ride, and he made a documentary for Discovery Channel. No money, 4 months. Incredible. Like, we did some things. I tried to bring that sort of ethos to the adventure that we had, but he did it like strictly, and he did it 100%. And as you can tell, he's a pretty like neat guy, you know. He doesn't strike you as like some, you know, dirtbag vagabond kind of fellow, but he is like the purest dirtbag vagabond ever, and he's done some incredible stuff. But yeah, apparently farming for yourself is one of the biggest challenges. Being self-sufficient, you know, is one of the biggest challenges. But I feel like that's sort of the center point of the SDGs, actually. It's all about like giving other people self-sufficiency, you know?
Right. And I think also the time we're living through right now with, you know, sorry, excuse my cat, but the time we're living through right now, it's quite, COVID reminds us so much about the fact that we're so dependent on these systems, and it's actually been quite endearing to watch quite a few people start to grow their own vegetables during this lockdown period, or you know, even if it's just growing potatoes or carrots. I think sometimes we forget that we're actually empowered to do these things, and when we talk about the fact that we don't have time, it's really not that we don't have time, it's where do we use our time and how do we use it, right? So it's like anything new that you start to do. When I started growing vegetables on my balcony, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna figure it out. And over time, I realized that it's not as difficult as we think it is, you know. And I think there's an aspect of growing plants, and you guys will resonate with this because of, you know, the work you guys do with Gone West. But there's something also very supportive to your mental health when you work with plants, and just that, you know, downtime. And I'm not a scientist, but I truly believe like plants do something to you. I think Japanese people talk about forest bathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
Phytoncides.
exactly. Well, you know about this, Cameron. You tell us about this.
I mean, I know very little. I mean, I know I love being in the forest, and there's some, you know, fantastic thing that happens when I spend time there. But yeah, it's a chemical thing. It's, you know, phytocides are released by trees, and this helps us in so many ways. Helps our circulation. It helps reduce stress because you have better circulation. It trees planted in neighborhoods produce less crime. It's tons of things. We don't know anything about plants. That's the point. Like, we don't know anything. Like, a plant can tell. A plant is basically psychic.
Yeah.
There's so many studies on this, and we barely understand it. But it's magical what these creatures can do, and they've been doing it for millions of years. And so, yeah, we have to learn from them in a sense. And so I guess that's the real benefit of gardening in a way, is you kind of get to like touch this greater knowledge, which has been around for a long time, and kind of meditate with it.
I think it's also the relationship you build with it. Like, I've spoken to so many friends, colleagues, people, and you know, if they've grown something, and for example, if it died, like if it was an aloe vera plant or, you know, avocado or whatever, there's like so much emotional attachment to it when they've grown it. And I think that's also something we forget when we look at sustainable development. We all forget that we have some sense of ownership on the few little things that we do, because we always kind of attribute the problem to a bigger player, or like, you know, big ag or whatever. We don't think about what am I doing? And a big theme of today has been a lot of like reflecting on what do we do personally. So it just leads me nicely into you guys' story. You know, what you guys did was truly personal, but I think you touched on so many different goals without knowing it. So yeah.
What do you think about that, Guillermo? What the hell did we do?
Well, definitely well put without knowing it. What did we do? I think at first we just wanted to like prove ourselves, and then first we just wanted to see if we could survive with our passions, being a cook and being a filmmaker on the road on our own, and therefore already trying to break a stereotype that you need a place where to be, you need a place where to fit in order to achieve your goals. We took the road, and we thought about the furthest place that we could imagine, which was Singapore. And I remember we were talking about this over Skype, Cameron and I said like, yeah, I would love to go to Singapore and open a restaurant. And he said something like, I'll come with you, but if we go by land. And then we did that. We found a way to get to Singapore without flying. And then in this process that with a lot of drinking for sure.
That was the way.
that was the flying.
Just a 9-month drinking story. But we saved a lot of CO2.
I mean, we also admit a lot because we were talking nonstop about all those theories. But and then along the way, we said, all right, this is just not going to be another trouble of like two drunk idiots going around. Let's find a purpose. And purpose then became testing this our capacity, and therefore inventing a way on how to get in touch with people and how to communicate with people in the best way we could figure it out. And therefore we started this project of cooking for people in exchange of their stories. And this is where we started to gather a little bit of our knowledge that today we have among many of the people that we encountered, and many different projects that they all had. Some are applicable to the talk that we have today, and then one of those is a dear friend of us, which is Lonais, which is a tree planter, which is an educator, which is a dancer, a cook, and who knows. And he showed us a similar way that Rob has of like believing into a project, deciding what to do for that project, and then just do it, and then just act upon and bring it on. That was Lonais. That is Lonais.
Yeah, full commitment.
Full commitment, exactly.
All right. Well, if you guys want to see this guy, because I did bring the camera, Namisha will need your help. We'll need your genie powers, your Eugenie powers. Can you look at the second one? You found it. Well done. And go to 16 minutes and 40 seconds.
Can I start it at like...
That's perfect. Right there.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
It's the age-old story, the voyager and the perils in his way. That hunger to keep going towards some familiar unknown. This is the odyssey we all face in our lives, the long journey home. But for one, it was here. His name is Lonais. We came here to find him, and maybe some small piece of our own destination. can I say how I see a little bit? I want to
Yeah.
I mean, okay. It's all about serendipity. It's a special kind of tree, and it's like speaking to you. And I researched it, and it happens to be the tree of Zeus and the most precious tree for ancient Greeks, because it's like the key of the ecosystem. There are about 12 of them on the island, like the 12 gods. And now it's only located in this far, far, far away location. It completely disappeared. It was completely used or burnt.
Today we're hunting. Like in the old days, when you had to walk out the door and search to improve your taste buds.
I'm very curious, all right? Me too.
Food is de-evolving because everything is available on a shelf. We're forgetting the real taste of things. That is why we're climbing a mountain and selecting ingredients along the way, using our nose to track down the flavors we have been missing. And if you happen to find a shepherd's cottage in a dark night where to cook this meal, we assure you that it will taste even better.
Я відчув воду серця, тут назавжди відтепер. Світ мені луна назустріч, як козак я мушкетер. Як зустрічають іноземця, я кажу йому без жур, що нема шпа, що нема шпа, ці жур. Десь у нетрах у Карпатах, я не Петр, я Степан. Десь душа моя блукає.
Yeah, wild goats, wild acorn, wild stuff, wild herbs. Yeah, wild Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good. If today reality doesn't satisfy you, it means that you forgot what it is to be human. Listen to your guts and walk out the door to hunt for better food.
Something immortal about this.
That tree used to be life for the ancient Greeks, so why shouldn't it be today? Anybody from 5 to 100-year-old, you can take an acorn and put it in the earth, and it grows, and it makes a small tree, and after years you have shade, something. It's a long process. I won't see it with my eyes. It's again a challenge. I like challenges. It's what keeps you going, keeps you fit. I mean, if you stay in a chair, I mean, I think we are designed to solve problems, to walk, to use our hands, our feet, our whole capacity, the mind and the heart, and everything has to be kept alive. And well, that's what I try to do. Keep going. I should have put it in silence. Yeah, that's my cousin getting married. Yeah. That was great, huh? Guys, thanks a lot.
Hey,
I enjoyed it.
say goodbye.
Bye. Okay, don't stay too long because it might rain.
It's a perfect place to stop. I'll just point it out right now.
Origin liquor.
Ah!
All right, Nim, kill it.
Kill it. Kill it.
We go off on a tangent after this.
Yeah,
You know, when we make a script, we do make sense.
Good job, guys. That was quite good.
Thank you.
That was
Um,
part of a big experiment.
Still running.
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah, one of the best recipes we ever had, though, because it just came from the road. Like, we were literally just picking ingredients as we were walking, and put it together in a stew. You cook it slowly, and you cook it with love and with good company, and you appreciate it so much more, especially for the effort, you know. So, and that the next morning when that you saw the sun rising over the clouds on those cliffs, like, you, nothing's better than that. Like, no amount of success is better than that feeling, I think.
Anyway,
Yeah, so Loanais is a great, now he's basically doing foraging workshops on that island. He has a project called School Without Frontiers, which is sort of like a interactive knowledge sharing. It's not about like, it's, you know, challenging the whole hierarchy of education. So that's quite beautiful. And now he's working really hard actually to help a school on one of the islands of Greece, which was burned down in sort of a protest against the presence of refugees. So I will share with you that information on the comments as well if you want to follow up with his story.
A very, very impressive human being, and also definitely one of the person that in this journey inspired us to then like have a concept, write down a concept of what we were doing, like the whole Sol.Food cinema adventure and the Sol.Food cinema production, what is based on. Because he's talking about ancient, he's talking about the past. Is you can see in the video that we are cooking with acorns, and you can see in the video before that Rob is talking about the weed that grows just outside of the house, and that's full of nutrients, full of vitamins and things that we don't think they're there, but they are. As much as in those acorns, as much in so many other ingredients that we forgot to utilize, to implement in our diet, because they are sometimes they taste a little funny. Sometimes it takes many hours to prepare them. Sometimes we don't know how to prepare them, and so simply we access to something that is easy to make, easy to cook. Because yes, we don't have time, but by doing so, then we allowed the system around us, the food production system around us, to satisfy this laziness that we have towards the fuel that we put inside ourselves. And that's why in Italy, maybe 60, 70 years ago, you would find 250 different types of tomatoes that they grew from the Alps to Sicily. And because nature find million ways to adapt and to evolve and to then survive. But we are at the moment doing everything possible to limitate nature and stop her to be what she's supposed to be. And that's why you then find in the supermarket only 4 or 5 different varieties of tomatoes, which they all taste the same. But anyway, what this guy inspired us, and the ancient and the art and everything that we documented and studied along the road gave us a concept, which is we've imagined this first meal between 2 people, like Cameron and I, like the cook and the hunter comes back with the steak to the cook, and the cook says, like, all right, it's again steak, and it's again cold, and it's again bloody. But that day, the cook somehow managed to find the charcoal, or find some fire that was like there by the thunder, whatever. He appeared, and he figured out that by using that and the other thing, he could cook, and he could create, and he could transform that raw ingredient into something that smelled much better, that it wasn't that poisoning like sometimes meat is, because it's not conserved in a way that it's supposed to be. And so then they're sitting now around a fire with a full belly and with something that they never tasted before. So the intestine, the stomach, which in the Eastern culture is considered to be the second brain, or the first brain, is now analyzing all those new informations that are running through your mind, and new emotions. And this is where sometimes we like to go, Cameron and I, and think about that. This simple action started everything that today we're dealing with. It started art, it improved language to have better food, it improved, it created music to then celebrate that meal. It created a lot of things, and it create our, in a way, our society and the way that we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our little dream, little fantasy about what this is. But we find some theory. It's a little theory that we're still working on it.
And go on, Namisha, please.
That brings me nicely onto a few questions that are being asked on the feed. So someone has asked, how much impact do you think we can have as individuals by adopting a plant-based diet?
I mean, obviously it depends on where the plants are being grown. Because I mean, industrial agriculture is the main kind of destroyer of the planet. We got like 60 years of topsoil left, which is pretty insane. And you could do that by growing vegetables. You could definitely mess up the world by growing vegetables and shipping them around the world as well. I mean, I love avocados, but they don't grow here. I'm in Croatia at the moment, but they don't grow here. So by being, you know, something like plant-based or vegan or whatnot, you're not really helping anything. You're just trying to label your disposition. So I would say more like, you know, just working local, eating local, you know, eating just what's growing around you is I think a better way to have an impact on many ways, you know, on your own health, but mainly on the distribution of food, you know, and the way it's grown. It's much more practical, much more natural. So that could really change some things. It would really change things, honestly. I mean, imagine if everyone's eating local, like supermarkets don't really exist the way that we know them. It might even inspire travel, you know, if you want to eat something that's like different, you have to go and find it. And then how amazing would it taste then, you know? Having everything is definitely not the way to reach satisfaction. Maybe I went off on a tangent there a little bit.
No. I mean, I completely agree with you. It is a lot about locally grown produce, right? So whether that's vegetarian or, you know, dairy or meat, I think the one thing people tend to forget is to look at how far does your food go to get into your stomach. And I think when you start to think like that, it's situational. It depends on where you live. But I think if we're going to talk broad spectrum, like, is there a overall impact on your health and the planet if in the way we live right now we were to adopt a plant-based diet? Then I would preface it with what you said, Cameron, which is, well, it depends on, you know, where the stuff has come from. But second to that, I personally believe that industrial meat, or the way
it's the worst,
industrial meat, it's
Sure thing.
worse. So, you know, if you can, in the cities you live in where, you know, you don't have the luxury to do the things that you know, like grow your own food, etc., then, you know, definitely cutting out meat makes a difference, because predominantly in cities, meat will come from those large scale production lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like just ultimate like pain and suffering, and just treating yourself like a god. Creates tons of methane. Most of like the water consumed in the world is for farm animals.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's a really, really horrible system, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
And I think like
I,
the saddest statistic I've read is that of all of the living things on this planet, humans plus animals for agricultural purposes or food consumption take up almost, I think, 93% of the planet. So you
yeah,
only
no, it's a lot.
7% of wild, truly wild. And so I
Yeah,
think
and we
it,
kill most of them.
exactly. So I think if we were to adopt a plant-based diet in its entirety, absolutely it will support so many other impacts globally, like, counting for exactly all the things you said, Cameron: water consumption, methane
Yeah.
emissions. There's quite a few on a global scale. So yes, I think it works. But Jima, I'd be interested to hear what you think.
I agree. I mean, with the both of you, and I think what you said before, Nimisha, was for me is the focus. But yes, plant-based better than meat, of course. Locally, even better. And then time, travel back in time. So what you said before in Kenya, that you had that sort of food experience where there was, so the local, but on only it was until like 30-40 years ago, except the royals, which they never like, not the royals, but like the classes that were above the most of the people on the planet.
Yeah.
Except them, most of the humans, they had to look at food based on availability. And so only 30 and 40 years ago, we would of course eat meat because it was necessary. But it was one cow a year for a family, or one pig a year for a family, depending on the economy and the availability of the food at the time. We had a much better. We used to have a much more balanced relationship with the place around us, the the place where we grow our food, the place where we lived, and so on.
It's an
And we
ecosystem.
don't anymore,
Yeah.
because everything now is, with Amazon fresh produce, you can have a completely a fresh garden in your house in like few hours, and you can tell yourself you're eating fresh. You can tell yourself that you are making a difference, but in reality, you're just feeding another system that it wants to make you believe you're making a difference. In reality, you have to just like renounce to some of the many things that you love, and accept the fact that if we have to achieve zero hunger, and if we have to achieve the goals that we are telling ourselves, and in like as humanity, as a planet, then every single one of us has to do a step back, and has to renounce to that avocado, to that slice of meat, to that bottle of wine, all of us, and in that way we can change something.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe.
But there's an upside to it as well, that so the healthiest generation to live in the United Kingdom was the generation from the Second World War, and those recipes were super sparse. They had like nothing, and yet the families, generally the women, because they were the ones who were still alive, and not in the army, were able to create what we know now as like traditional British cuisine. But it was much better then, because it was given so much more care, so much more love, so much more attention, because it's all they had. And that created the healthiest generation of Britons ever. So just because you don't have as much doesn't mean that you're not gonna, be fit and healthy, and
Exactly.
enjoy the heck out of it.
And
just that we have so much, as you pointed out, that it actually reduces our enjoyment, you know? When you have
does.
everything, what more could you, you know, you're always searching for more. You don't appreciate what you have. Yeah.
Yeah, I come from like Italy is like the Italian cuisine, which is considered to be a really good one around the world. And there's always been the fight between the Italians and the French and who cooks better and so on. It's you're looking at two different kind of traditions and culture. The Italians in the last 100 years, which are the Italian cookbook has been written like 100 years ago, basically, by Peregrino Artusi, and all the recipes were poor recipes, and that's the strength of the Italian cuisine. It's the poor recipe with great produce and a lot of time spent in the kitchen to prepare that, because if you decide to become vegan tomorrow, but truly vegan, and so you're not buying your produce from the market, but you decide to work with legumes, with vegetables, and so on, to get rid of the bad smell that a lentils or a bean can then create into your guts, because we don't have an enzyme that digests that specific thing, then it means that you need to cook that bean for 12 hours. So we don't really have that time to do that. And that's why we say, like, all right, I'll be vegan and I'll eat avocados until the rest of the day, because they give me all the proteins and things that they do. But that's exactly the wrong way of taking it. So doing again one more step back, it's not just about food and how we grow it, it's also about education on how to cook it, on how to experience the way on how we feed ourselves. And so, yeah, again, zero hunger, food, educations, especially educations, like teaching, passing down the knowledge on any level on how to help yourself, help others, and help yourself to live better.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally like we all have to build a new relationship with food, basically.
Yeah.
Completely different
Entirely.
relationship. Yeah.
And it's funny that it took only 20 years to destroy 3,000 of knowledge and culture about it, because the Vader's book, which are we have some of the first recipes there, and who knows other books, they have 2,000, 3,000 years, and they were already eating muesli and yogurt and all the things that nowadays you would find in a hipster bar sold to you for €7, when in reality you can just go to your friend, which makes, or even yourself, you take the milk, you take the cream, and you just add a little bit of probiotics, and you have yogurt, and then you make yourself the muesli, and you spend 50 cents.
Yeah.
But
hey, there you go.
It's actually not me. It's my she's making her own kefir yogurt.
Nice.
And I miss that partner. I miss that food from the partner.
Well, I'm just going to take the opportunity to segue us to an awesome place in the west of Ireland, County Clare. Mm-hmm. We're going to County Clare, Ireland now, where there's a good little farm with some surfers, and they decided to take matters into their own hands and plant a farm to prevent monoculture plantations from taking over their area. Shall we now?
Shall we?
It's called Moy Hill Farm. And yeah, let's go.
Don't get ahead of yourself, Cameron.
I heard the flute.
The music, yeah. There you go.
Thanks, Nim.
That's all right.
Kept saying I'm going to start growing food and I want to involve people in it, and everyone's like, but you don't own any land, how are you going to do that? Like, it's like, I have no idea, but I'm going to start doing it.
A lot of memories, a lot of work has gone into this place.
When it began, oh how you tread with care, you held his hand.
We had a YouTube series 6 years ago. People still think that's where we're at and that's where the farm's at, but we've actually progressed a lot since then, so these videos are going to update everyone to where we're at right now. It all started in this garden. This is where it all began, and when we started this, we then got offered an acre of land just on loan.
What about life? I'm craving simple taste. Grow my own food and cut it off. I cut back on my waist. And what more do I need?
It was always borrowed land. There was never any official agreement, and then the owner wanted the land back. So we had this time where we were like, we've started the CSA, we've started the markets, we're feeding people. We really wanted to keep it going. The neighbors told us about a piece of land up on the top of the hill. The land wasn't great, but we didn't really have many options, so we just went and we bought it.
What day is it, Fag?
Sunday, the 14th of June, 2015.
JP, first man to do anything.
Yeah, JP in the field.
Yeah, the first year was mad. The place when we got here was like a rushy, wet swamp, basically. And we were just like building raised beds on top of the swamp while trying to put up our first tunnel, while trying to get roads in here and then start building this shed. And the first 2 years, the first year was really mad.
Left, right, left.
How did I land with you on these sands? Shall we go swim in the Indian Sea? How do I explain? It's worse than a dream. I find myself tied with you by my side. Shall we go back on a merciless street and get there than we could ever eat? I think I know what you are.
So yeah, to summarize where we are at right now is, you know, we're on borrowed land. We have to buy our own land to keep the CSA going and the kind of vision that we had. So we, being myself and my wife Sally and Mitch and Matt, basically came together and bought the 17 acres. And then this new land came for sale. We saw the signs go up and we're like, wow, we didn't really expect to be able to buy it. So we rang about it anyway, asked who was trying to buy it, and it was 3 forestry companies. So we kind of just were like, what do? We have no money, but we just couldn't let the forestry company buy 60 acres of land all around us and just turn it into an ecological desert of monoculture. So basically the auctioneer gave us a last chance. He said, you make an offer now or it's gone to the forestry company. So we basically just said, yeah, we'll top that number. It was €300,000. And then after Matt, who was dealing with the auctioneer, got off the phone, we had to get very busy. We then did a crowdfunding campaign.
You can spend money on good things and you can spend money on meaningless things.
It'd be a really amazing thing to show that people can do this without needing big bank loans or big companies supporting them, that we can do this together. People have lots of power.
Yes, support it. These kind of things provide the hope for the future.
These help us grow more courgettes.
Red cabbage.
More beetroot.
More spring onions.
More kale.
More carrots.
More basil and tomatoes.
I'm a cucumber.
More spuds.
More flowers. More onions.
And marrows.
And the chocobas.
We had over 600 people donate money. And yeah, it was an amazing community effort or something, like everyone getting behind, like having 600 people behind us saying,
we believe in what you're doing, even if it's 20 euro, it kind of makes you feel like we're not mad, and yeah, go for it, take the risk, because we want this to happen. It's about 60,000. Yeah, we basically started ringing around and asking friends and family for loans.
We can't think of any better project to give it to. You're kind of doing what we should have done and we couldn't do. So, without further ado,
That's enough sunshine.
there you go.
So much.
Getting 100,000 euro from a bank called Clan Credo, which is an ethical bank, and yeah, the rest is friends and family. Hopefully in a couple of years we can get through these debts, because it's been really challenging. Everyone here has worked for free for 3-4 years, and the only way it's been made possible here is because myself, Mitch and Matt were professional surfers. So, and professional surfing is you get paid to go surfing, but surfing is a very irregular sport. Some days it's really good, and then for 10 days it's not good. So we've basically been living around our surfing careers. So that's a big thing. And so the lads are still surfing, I'm still surfing. We haven't given up surfing, but we've taken on a lot of other commitments at the same time. And yeah, it can be done.
My baby, just 3 weeks to go. The rain is falling wildly, but the moon is still aglow. And tomorrow there'll be sunshine, and the garden will be green. We'll lay a bed of lilies for you to dream. My baby, just 3 weeks to go. Your mother's singing softly to the music playing low. She feels you from heart to knees. The love for you is as deep as the sea.
We're into our second season on our new land, and it's been really busy. We've done a lot. Yeah, things are really happening now. We've got the orchard planted, the market garden is going really well, really booming out veg. Great team now, and yeah, there's just so many things happening. More animals, the pastures are coming on. I just want to show you it all. It's really exciting.
My baby, just 3 weeks to go. The house is a buzzing, anticipation for you, From the inside to the outside, the faces here, they glow. Girl, you're welcome here, it's more than you know. Yeah, we'll see you when the winds begin to blow. Yeah, we'll see you when the winds begin to blow.
What do you think of that, Namisha?
Very, so many emotions. I mean, if what is that? Did you have
So I hitched to a wagon.
I can't stop this. It's like
Now I
so
can
good.
sell
No, can't stop this train.
That's probably how I feel, actually. It's a movement. You see this happening everywhere. And I think it's because of exactly what you said, Jimo. People have pretty much fucked it all up, excuse my French, in the last 20 years. So for all intents and purposes, at least our generation moving forward understands that that's not how we can live. So we all have to think of different ways that we can, basically sustain ourselves. And all of these stories are just an example of that. to be honest, when I watched that, I was like, oh, I want to go do that. See?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good life too. I ran into those guys back in 2017. I was within County Clare doing some tree planting, and my friend James took me up to that farm at like 6 a.m. to help them harvest. And yeah, they had just such a good vibe about the whole thing, you know. That evening they even had like a little get together, a speaker session.
Yeah.
Mary Reynolds was there, who's like kind of a household name in gardening.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just become like, there's even some guys from Italy there. There was like a super cool dude from Italy named like Flavian, who was there trying to gain inspiration for what he was doing. And yeah, they just did it in a way based on simple things, you know, like appreciation for the planet because they're surfers, and just like wanting to, you know, have control over their own lives and their own destinies, and also like screw over a big forestry company who wanted to buy the land. So they took a risk, as you may have heard, and they took a big loan, and they just, yeah, it was super disruptive and super like very socially active what they did. It's not just about vegetables.
And I think we also forget that in the vast parts of the world, people still live like this. You know, we still have community-based culture in a lot of you know, rural parts of Africa. And when I say rural, I mean, you know, Africa is pretty well connected now, but one thing I have seen is that integrity to community and at least to self-sustenance is still strong within their roots. So I think it's also about taking examples from all parts of the world and, you know, using that as your source of inspiration. But the one thing I loved about that story was community is everything. Like I think, you know, we it's a theme almost of today, and I think it's going to continue to be a theme of this entire summit, which is all of these people we've heard through today and all these stories you guys have shared. Their activism worked because they had a community around them who really believed in what they did. And when you do that, when you gather people around a specific purpose, which they all feel connected to, you can't buy that anywhere. Like you can't recreate that in business. It's actually a subject we talk about. We're like, how do you create culture in organizations? And I was like,
right.
If you're paying people, you kind of can't, because you know when you work in these spaces that there's always that monetary exchange that's associated to how you show up. But a lot of the stories that you've shared, and even the stuff that you guys did, it was a lot about the reliance of other people to just come along and support you without any expectation in return. And I think that's what's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, like the human factor is key to the whole thing, you know, and that's like the ultimate kind of reward in a sense, is the relationships that you get to develop through doing a project like Moy Hill Farm, or the School Without Frontiers, or I'm sure, I know for a fact Rob's got his people skills down, and yeah, that's the beauty, because I mean, I was doing some research on addiction, and basically the difference between like a heroin addict and your grandmom who goes to the hospital and gets painkillers is relationships, you know. And without that relationship, it's really easy for you to tumble off, and you can have everything, you know, you can have all the food you want in the world, but if you don't have relationships, basically you're an addict. At least this in terms of my own health, let's say, people are definitely the most important thing, and being able to create something together, whether it be like a conversation, or a cookbook, or a community farm, like that's what drives you on. That's what makes you have a better life. That's what helps you grow.
Yeah, I mean, we are innately, in our nature as humans, have a desire to connect with each other. So, that's just a fundamental tenet of community. And like you guys talked about earlier, it's what food has done. People gather around food, stories have been created around food. Like Jimo, you explained it so nicely. So many things have happened simply just around the concept of eating and tasting and experiencing. So I'm really loving where this is going, because I think sometimes people forget that if we're going to tackle hunger at a global level, we have to really think about how we consume our food in a way that allows others to have enough as well. And what I mean by that is, if you look at just the basic economics of how food moves around the planet, you are marginalizing so many people in the countries where the food is made. And then you're kind of depleting the nature's ability to repair itself, because you're flying this food all over the place. So when people say, oh, but how can I solve hunger in another part of the world because I'm just going to my supermarket buying my food? I'm like, well, you can, because we're so disconnected with that simple story of how food gets to our plate. And I think if we really took time to understand that, we'd make so many different choices generally. So I like how you guys brought that together. I do have a question for you from the audience.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it said, you met many people on your travels in impoverished areas. Did you find that these communities experience real hunger, and how did they deal with that?
Chef?
Nice one. Yes, they do experience real hunger for me. But again, it's not anymore, or at least like what we saw in India, what we saw in places around the world. It's not the hunger. It's not famine. It's not eating. Is the hunger for everything that they cannot have, but they now see on a screen. They now see on their phones, which they have, in order to evade from the everyday reality, the poverty, or whatever. It's not satisfying them. It's not a healthy hunger. It's the hunger of that like attacks us all in the time of capitalism, in a way. Is the desire of is being unsatisfied, and is the desire of like wanting something that you don't have, which for me is logical. Like, it's like, why should I be the one here in the corner of India and not having the, like, why should you be doing this and I cannot do this? Why can I not do the same that you are doing? Because nowadays, sorry, you're muted.
It's like the inequality of what goes on, as in what they experience when they look at you and where they are. It's exactly what you said. It's not fair. Why does that? Why do you get to it and they don't?
Because like in something that I for example, in India again, which is definitely the country that Kamara and I spend the most amount of time, and is definitely one of the most interesting places we've been for because it's an alien place completely from compared to where we come from. Yes, famine, hunger, real hunger, so much of it, but at the same time, the system that we all live in have found ways to feed everybody. So creating very, very small portions of food, candies, wrappings, dehydrated food, and so on. So there is always every day a potential meal until the system works. So, for example,
until the system doesn't work.
Oh, yes, yeah, of course. That's a great debatable, but like in this kind of sense, until the system works. I was talking about the coronavirus.
Exactly.
So the system was working for them to eat every day, to scrap together for the very, very poor to like go collect and beg a little bit of money outside of a church, so they had the food to sustain themselves for that day. But then that system, which is definitely not working, and finally we're all opening our eyes about it, then that system crashed down. And who suffers the most in any difficult situations? Again, always the one at the bottom of the food chain, in a way. So the poor of India, that now they cannot put together anymore like the necessary money to feed themselves. Now their experience is zero hunger, but they still have a phone in their hands somehow, and they still get that information that is worldwide right now. So now the hunger is duplicated. Now they're seeing that there are parts of the world that are still doing great, and they're not, and this is terrifying, especially if you have a family and kids and all around you a community.
That was a pretty full answer. Yeah. I mean, India is a great example of actually how like dependency has gone really, really wrong, because for a very long time they were self-sufficient. I mean, even
some
now,
thousands of years.
But yeah, unfortunately, because the urban areas have really become super dense, like 2 out of the 3 biggest cities in the world are in India. And you have, I don't know, the green wave movement, where basically industrial farming just became really big, and it made it possible for people in India to experience what we experience now, which is sort of like a supermarket, for lack of a better word. But yeah, when COVID hit and the lowest classes, the migrant workers, basically the day workers, had to go home, there was nothing to support them. They had no work, and they had no farm anymore, because they didn't think it was necessary anymore.
And I think we also forget that that green wave movement in India has also put a lot of thriving farmers out of business, because they've bought into that whole GMO and seeds, and this better
exactly.
crop, and or they've gone into growing cotton, which is just not the most sustainable crop to grow generally, but even then the yields are just not in any space where you could truly survive as family. And in India, families are big, they're not small. So but I also see your point, Jimo, where I've seen that personally. My mom, is born in India, so my life experience with India has been seeing it change over the last 30 years, having gone there every 2-3 years. And you are right. The onslaught of malls, supermarkets, and this whole westernized version of what is now the new India is where you saw the biggest disparities start to come about. Because before that, these are memories of my own when I was like 2 or 3 years old and I was in India. My grandma, when she would finish cooking, she would, if we had food left over, she would kind of just leave it outside. And I remember once I was asking her, I was like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "Well, either a cow will come eat it, or if there's like these people, migrants who are walking through, they'll pick it up." And I was like, "But won't they think like it's bad or anything?" She goes, "No, people here like do it all the time." And so that culture or philosophy was always there anyway. So one of my pet, well, not pet peeves, but it's something I would like to really educate people in places like Asia and Africa, is that the West is not the blueprint to follow. Like, what you guys did 50 years ago, you are good. Like, stop changing it all, because at that point you were able to be self-sustaining and survive. And it goes back to your point, Jimo, you're so right, because you are right. There is hunger and there is famine, but the hunger for that desire to be like how they perceive us to be is even bigger, and that drives them to do crazier, sillier things. So wherein they could get to a point where they would be able to feed themselves, it's like you said, the hunger is bigger. That's not enough anymore. It's not enough that I can feed myself, so I'll go do something even more ridiculous to try and get to where you are, and compromise feeding my family to get to that point. So it's psychological.
And also
the fisherman. Sorry, go on. I had a metaphor, but
please.
I was gonna say it's similar to it's a gift of the magi kind of thing, where the fisherman would like sell his rod in order to buy an iPhone, you know, so that he can compete in the modern world. And then all of a sudden, the modern world decides to crash because it's built on sand, and now he can't fish anymore. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's the situation we're in.
What I wanted to add was that we are all, and that's the. I was doing the researches on Zero Hunger, and I was like putting my head down and like look at what we're all trying to do. But I really see this sort of like bizarre acknowledgement of what hunger in this case is, because now we're talking about India and what happened there, and we're talking about like the topic. But in reality, this topic of hunger really very much applies to us all in general. It doesn't matter if like maybe you have all the food in the world, that's what we're saying before, but we also use the screens and the laptops and the desktop and envy to always to feed us and to look like the one is always above us, which they're not necessarily, but that's how we depict everything that is shining around us, from a plate to a car. So yes, Zero Hunger in the sense of how we write it on the Wikipedia page, which is all the information that I studied on, and I'm not an expert about it for this reason. But we have a program for everyone that is not eating enough. But there are many missing programs for us all, for the education necessary to stop to like look outside of that window and to really start to look into yourself and how you feed yourself in general.
Nice.
And I think it's also I like what you said there, because when I think in the Western world we forget that it is actually that kind of introspection that we need in order for us to become self-sustaining. It's like, you know, when people say, I would never go and live on a farm because, oh my God, how could I, right? It's because they're still living with that construct of, like you said, Jimo, trying to be all the other shiny things around them, as opposed to looking within themselves and going, do I really need this? And it's like that self-healing that needs to happen if we're truly going to be self-sustaining. So yeah, I like how you did that.
Cheers.
Would you guys like to go on a little trip to Vietnam?
Please.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
Would you like to introduce it to us? What's happening there?
Well, basically, it was a time when all we really wanted was to get away from people. We basically traveled across the world without flying, and got to the other side. And what did we find? Our own culture again. The tourist culture of Southeast Asia. And so we wanted to escape it and just go be in nature. And we spent 4 days hitchhiking down the coast of Vietnam in search of our paradise, our beach. And it was impossible because everything is either developed into some sort of touristical attraction, which is kind of funny for a communist country, or it's military, which is a bit more fitting. So we basically found a forbidden island, and we managed to convince some young fishermen to take us there. And this is what we found.
What on earth are you using to clean up this beach? No, basically we're using trash to clean up trash. State of the art, super efficiency.
We're looking for a paradise. Just sea, sand, and peacefulness. A beach.
They didn't exist. They were either full of tourists or they're full of trash.
Fake environments. That's what we found. We found fat tourists and 5-star hotels. It's like being on a safari. So you're looking for the wild, but the actual wild has been domesticated. So
instead of living an experience, you're like consuming an experience and then throwing out the wrapper to be washed up on some beach. So we decided to get out of there and go find a place where we could just kind of be in the wild and do some training and eat and just be out of the loop for a bit. And we found our beach at last.
beautiful, unfortunately full of trash. So we had two options. One was keep going, the second one was to clean it up.
Yeah, we said, let's just clean it up. Instead of searching for this thing that we want, we'll just make it. Yep.
Hopefully we learned a good lesson here.
Yeah. Well, let me know if you figure it out. Thank you. Oh, you're the best. It's better not be spicy, right? Right. Trash in the back. Ah. You alright? No. Oh, you got stabbed. Some of the front. Ah. Let's see if there's any blood on this.
Oh, that is so.
Alright, false alarm, folks. Back to the job.
And well, we tried our best.
Now we just want to be out here.
We test our capacities. See where we can go.
Now we're gonna build this wild sanctuary that we had talked about. We're gonna reuse a lot of this wasted space, wasted material. And the food is awesome. The food is great. When you really need it at the end of the day, food is the best.
Rice on the menu. That's it. Some veggies. No sugar for the last 5 days.
You've outdone yourself this time, Kev. Oh yeah.
The city just doesn't happen. You have any options available. You have fun, you have food, you have your routine, you have the gym, you have the work that you have to do, the friends you want to see. Everything is handy. Yeah, you get soft.
We're gonna do a sneak attack interview on Guglielmo.
What are you doing in this man's bathroom?
Now you're crossing the line. I think this man left. This man doesn't like us to stink. So invite us for breakfast this morning. And now for dinner. But not only give us food, but also give us a shower. After, I don't know. And this is pretty fantastic.
Right.
It's clean. It seems clean. Soap everywhere. We found a family here that adopted us, and it's been just bombarding us with food and drink and good times. Again, no English. They don't just figured it out. It's really wild. Like they think we're the poor people because we're living on a beach picking up trash. Hey, here he is, Mr. Viet. Hey, Viet. Yeah, you're gonna down here for a treat. Let's go. Look how beautifully black is that thing. Our friend said of all the pile of trash that we've accumulated on the fire, nice clean solution. Yeah. Wait. Oh yeah, and the island was forbidden to tourists. Alright, so this is our military escort out of Bin Hung. Lucky us. Lucky fucking us. So yes, we managed to be kicked out from our Paradise Island. What an ending for a cookbook. This is historic, my friends. Never done that. So, check. Exactly.
So just to check, he burnt all that trash.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, no,
it was almost like a meme.
Yeah, right.
He knew we just didn't have the guts to do it. You know, he was introducing us to something that would become very common in the next months of our lives, which was piles of burning trash. Just how they handle things on that side of the world. So yeah, an educational experience for sure.
Oh, well. So we're 10 minutes away from finishing. So I was gonna wrap it up with one key takeaway for everyone who's watching from both of you. Who wants to go first?
Oh wow. You want to say something about this man? You want to say something about that fable? Or should I do it?
Oh, we each get a shot. Who wants to go first? That's the question.
Yeah, exactly. Go first.
All
Oh
right.
no! Close it. This is yours. I'll go. You close it. Out of this, I think the video, I think the story tells itself. We end up in a place, and we were looking for our own story to tell. We were looking for our own little place, and as usual, then we end up doing what we wanted to do, and in that situation was to clean up the beach and build a house out of it, and that was our own personal mission. Eventually, we encountered Viet, the chicken farmer of the island, and he saw what we were doing. He helped. He gave us some tools to do a better job, and then decided to basically adopt us. And he fed us day after day for like 3-4 days until we got kicked out. So I think the story here is pretty easy to read. He was not afraid to share everything that he had, and definitely he had much less than us and we ever had. And he was not afraid. He put on the table the food, and we created with no English and no common language a dialogue and a communications between us for 4 days. We had a great time, and we were we achieved our zero hunger together thanks to this guy. So yeah, would you all do the same? Are you ready to do the same? Are you ready to welcome 2 strangers in your house just because they're doing something? And are you ready to give them food and to start a conversation with someone that you don't know, someone that doesn't look like you, someone that doesn't speak like you? And are you ready to feed them in order to understand what people around you are doing? That's what I have to say.
Very, Gino. I think that's very powerful. Thank you. Cameron?
That was amazing.
Yeah. Cameron's gonna go, maybe you should have finished, you know.
Well done. Didn't see that one coming. I honestly, I'm hoping Namisha has more questions for us because I don't know how to wrap this thing up.
Well, you know, the people who are watching will obviously have gone on a fantastic journey with you guys. They're probably, you know, the one thing that they're probably asking themselves, it's kind of what Jimo said. What is the one thing they can do, right?
What is the one thing we can do? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess what we've discussed here is that hunger is not just a physical thing. And so much of what is actually creating hunger in this world is our desires, you know, our desires to have more, our desires to be somebody who we're not. And this is what is driving the industrial complex, which is creating hunger in a real way, in a physical way. So these two things are intrinsically linked. And so in the sense that if we all feel good in our own skin and we all see value in our own stories and we all feel that we have something worth sharing, then it's not so important what we're going to consume, you know? Something will come to you if you share. If you give something to someone else, then you're going to get back much more in return. And we haven't written the paper yet, but we've proved it. And people like Rob and the guys at Moy Hill Farm and Lonais and Viet proved that there's much to gain from giving, you know, and appreciating what you have rather than trying to find something more.
Yeah.
So in this time where we're all kind of stuck, actually, you know, we're all sort of trapped with what we got. Hey, Ben. In this time we're all like stuck with what we have, and I mean, for me as a traveler, being quarantined is like the worst fate, you know.
Yeah.
But I kind of just decided that, all right, I'm just gonna stay where I am, and not try to find the greener grass on the other side, and just appreciate where I am, even if it's not the perfect place, not physically speaking, because I'm in a beautiful place, but mentally, physically, you know, like I feel like there's much more for me out there. But instead of chasing that, as I did for so many years, with the help of my friend, stay where you are, enjoy where you are, make the most of where you are, and don't be reaching out trying to find something better from across the sea. So for me, that's my solution to zero hunger, both here and here.
I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much. You guys shared such fantastic insights. I know I learned so many new things from both of you. Definitely things I didn't think I would have thought about hunger. So thank you for that. Yeah, and just how can people connect with you, find you, look for you?
Do we have a website?
In about 12 hours. Still working on it. But you guys they can absolutely find us in Facebook and Instagram.
And your YouTube channel?
Sorry? And our YouTube
channel.
Our very unsuccessful YouTube channel. Yes. They can find them all and as Sol.Food Cinema, Sol.Food Cinema. And we will be better at that too, because it's we had a long journey, and we're still writing the paper. That's what we have to say. That's what Cameron said. We're still writing. We're still researching, and we're coming soon.
Well,
but thank you.
Fantastic work, guys. You know, I'm a fan, so you've got me there. But really, really appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts, your wisdom, your experiences, your stories, and most importantly, your time. So thank you so much. And yeah, I think everyone will be very, very grateful to all the stories you guys have shared. So
Thanks
thank
for
you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
No problem. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good luck.